Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Forex mentorship program for absolute beginners. Today, we are going to be looking at foreign currencies. It is important to note that the primary objective of this mentorship program is to teach us how to buy and sell foreign currencies in the foreign exchange market. Foreign currencies are divided into three major categories. We have the major currencies, we have the minor currencies, and we have the exotic currencies. The major currencies are further divided into major currency pairs, the minor currencies into minor currency pairs, and the exotic currencies into exotic currency pairs. Now, what are major currencies? Major currencies are simply the most heavily traded currencies, and they always represent currencies of some of the world's largest economies. Economies like New Zealand, Canada, the United States, and the like. There are only 8 major currencies: the United States dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, the Great British pound, the Swiss franc, the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar, and the Canadian dollar. In 1973, there was a standard or a convention that was established, and it stated that the first two letters of a currency represents its country, and the third letter represents its name. For example, for a currency to be formed, it has to contain three letters. The first two letters must represent that country, and the third letter must represent the name of the currency. For example, the United States of America, the first two letters is the US, and the third is the D, which represents the dollar. The second example is AUD. AU stands for Australia, and the D stands for the dollar, Australian dollar. Another example is JPY. JP stands for Japan, and the Y stands for the yen, Japanese yen. CAD. CA stands for Canada, and then D stands for the dollar, the Canadian dollar. This convention was established by the ISO, International Organization for Standardization, in 1973. Currencies have nicknames, but you don't have to save them. You don't have to know them. For example, the United States dollar is called the buck, the euro is called the fiber, the Japanese yen is called the yen, the Great British pound is called the cable, the Switzerland franc is called the Swissy, the Canadian dollar is called the loonie, the Australian dollar the Aussie, the New Zealand dollar the Kiwi. Like we said earlier, there are three categories of currencies. We have the major currencies, we have the minors, and we have the exotics. Now, in every currency pair, the first currency is referred to as the base currency. A currency pair is simply the combination of two currencies. The first currency is called the base, and the second currency is called the quote, because the second currency is quoted against the first currency. For example, Euro USD. Euro is the base currency, and USD is the quote currency because the dollar or the United States dollar is quoted against the euro. Now, let's look at the measures. We said already that there are 8 major currencies. There are 8 major currencies, but there are only 7 major currency pairs. Please do not get confused. 8 major currencies, but only 7 major currency pairs. Now, what are major currency pairs? Like we said before, a pair of currency can only be formed when we combine two currencies. Now, if we combine two major currencies, it is going to form a major currency pair. But this major currency must contain the United States dollar. Therefore, if we combine the euro and the United States dollar, it's going to form a major currency pair. If you combine the Japanese yen with the United States dollar, it's going to form a major currency pair. If you combine any major currency with the United States dollar, it's going to form a major currency pair. We have the Great British Pound against the United States dollar, it forms a pound dollar. The United States dollar against the Swiss franc, it forms the dollar Swissy. The United States dollar against the Canadian dollar, it forms the dollar loonie. The Australian dollar against the United States dollar, it forms the Aussie dollar. The New Zealand dollar against the United States dollar, it forms the Kiwi dollar. You see, all of these currency pairs contain the United States dollar. Now, the second category of currencies or currency pairs are the crosses or the minors. Now, what are the crosses or what are the minors? We said a pair of currency can only be formed when we combine two currencies. Now, when we combine two major currencies that do not include the United States dollar, it forms a minor. Remember, a major must contain the United States dollar, but a minor must not contain the United States dollar. That is the only difference between a major currency pair and a minor currency pair. They are all major currencies, but one of them should not contain the United States dollar. That is the difference, and that one is called the minor. Now, the most actively traded crosses are derived from three major non-US dollar currencies: the euro, the Japanese yen, and the Great British pound. Now, let's look at the euro crosses. If we take the euro is a major currency, don't forget. Now, if you cross the euro with other major currencies that are not the United States dollar, what are we going to have? For example, if we cross the euro against the Japanese yen, we are going to have the euro yen. The euro against the British pound, we are going to have the euro pound, the euro Canadian dollar, the euro Swiss franc, the euro NZD. If you cross the euro and the New Zealand dollar, you have the euro NZD. So AUD is going to give us the euro Aussie. You see, the United States dollar is not involved, but they are still major currency pairs called the minors due to the absence of the United States dollar. Now let's look at other crosses again, the yen crosses. The yen crosses can be formed when we combine the yen with any other major currency that does not contain the United States dollar. That is the difference. Now, if you combine the British pound with the Japanese yen, you are going to have the pound yen. The Canadian dollar with the Japanese yen, the loonie yen. Remember, you don't have to save these names, but if you know them, it is good. Because sometimes you could hear somebody say, I'm trading the Swiss yen, and you'll be wondering what the person is talking about. Now, if you combine the Swiss franc and the Japanese yen, you are going to have the Swiss yen, the Australian dollar and the Japanese yen, you are going to have the Aussie yen, the New Zealand dollar and the Japanese yen, you are going to have the Kiwi yen. Now, the third category of the crosses are the GBP crosses. If you combine the Great British pound with other pairs that does not involve the United States dollar, for example, the British pound and the Canadian dollar, you are going to have the pound loonie. The British pound and the Australian dollar, you are going to have the pound Aussie. The British pound and the Swiss franc, you are going to have the pound Swissy. The British pound and the New Zealand dollar, you are going to have the pound Kiwi. Now we have other crosses as well, and they still do not involve the United States dollar. For example, the Australian dollar and the Swiss franc, Aussie Swissy, Australian dollar and the Canadian dollar, Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar, Canadian dollar and the Swiss franc, New Zealand dollar and the Swiss franc, forming the Kiwi Swissy. Now, we also have the New Zealand dollar and the Canadian dollar, forming the Kiwi Loonie. All right, let's look at the exotics, which is the third category of currencies. Remember, we said we have three categories: the majors, the minors, and the exotics. Now, what are the exotic currencies? The exotic currencies consist of a major currency and one from an emerging market, such as Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Turkey, Hungary, Singapore, South Africa. Those countries fall under the category of emerging markets. Now, if you combine their currencies and one major currency, for example, the United States dollar, we are going to have an exotic pair. The United States dollar is combined with the South African rand. We are going to have the dollar rand. United States dollar combined with the Mexican pesos. We are going to have the dollar mex and the rest. So The difference between a major currency pair and a minor is that a major currency pair contains the United States dollar. A minor does not contain the United States dollar. What about the exotic? The exotic pair must contain one major currency, which could be the United States dollar, and a currency that belongs to a country that falls under the category of an emerging market. So that is the difference between those three categories of currencies. Now let's look at what happens when we buy and sell. Um, we can only buy and sell a currency pair, and we do that through forex brokers. We are going to talk about brokers in details, or CFDs, contract for differences. We'll talk about them. Now, what happens? Currencies are always in competition. It's like they are at war. This happens because um, the well-being of a currency of an exchange rate is dependent solely on the well-being of an economy. For example, if the economy of a particular country is doing extremely well, the exchange rate of that country is going to be very high. If the economy of another country is performing poorly, the exchange rate of that country is going to be very low. So, how do we buy and sell in the foreign exchange market? We look for a currency pair whose economy is doing good and another currency which economy is not doing good, and we combine them and then we trade them against one another. So, they are always at war. One is trying to be strong and the other is trying to be weak. When we understand things like this, we are able to go into the market and bet or speculate that this currency is going to gain strength because we think the economy of that country is going to do good. And this other country is going to lose strength because we think that the economy of that country is not going to do good. Combine them and then buy and sell in the foreign exchange market. It is also important to note that when you buy a currency pair, you are simultaneously selling the other. For example, if you have a currency pair like Euro USD, when you are buying the euro, you are simultaneously selling the dollar. When you are selling the euro, you are simultaneously buying the dollar. We are going to learn more about that in our subsequent lessons. Do not worry. Now, like we talk about currency codes, they were established in 1973, and the ISO also recognizes about 4,217 currency codes. I am going to share a link in the mentorship group so that you can have access to and look at them. There is something. The fact that we have a lot of currencies does not mean that you have to trade all of them. And that is one of the mistakes that beginner traders make. You are going to choose one or two currencies or three currency pairs, and you are going to become good at them and you will trade them. Because if you want to trade all of these pairs, you will end up being confused. Thank you so much for listening. I trust that you found value in this. In our next video, I am going to talk about currency correlation, the relationship between currencies, and how we should approach them and trade them in the market. Thank you so much for listening. Until I talk to you next time again, be safe.